the political fight from the No campaign and from the government in London has been really irresponsible and disorderly. I mean, I saw some tweet from Professor Jim Gallagher, who, as you might remember, is a very leading civil servant, saying the banks are leaving Scotland like we will have no branches, no staff, no nothing. Of course, what's actually happening is, according to the Chief Executive of the Royal Bank yesterday, who wrote to all of his staff, is the banks are staying. There'll be no effect for jobs, no effect on operations, but the legal registration moves from Edinburgh to London, and the reason for that is they want their current regulator to remain their current regulator, because there is no certainty in their minds as to what comes next. Why? Because the London government has decided to create that uncertainty as their sole tactic in the referendum campaign. So I don't think we can blame the banks. It's a very understandable move as they try and calm everyone through the transition. What I think's pretty unforgivable is the attempt to make this with glee a crude political point and somehow create uncertainty for people's jobs that's not real. And I think that's reprehensible, to be quite frank. I saw something from a leading minister saying that there would be more pandas than banks in Edinburgh, which is funny for about 20 nanoseconds until you realise that person's in charge of our country and should have a touch more grace about it. And it's not true. So much has gone wrong and is going wrong, and the institutions that governed us effectively were responsible for that, which is why I think people don't trust institutions, they don't trust big figures anymore, and I don't think it translates in the way it might have done in the 1990s. So we have a people's reaction to the fears and scare stories that have come out that effectively goes, you know, don't you dare tell us that we can't. And I thought that poster from the Yes campaign was really effective. The moment of the next few days is about us deciding for ourselves, are we willing to face what is always an uncertain future and take the decision to have control of our own boat, to grab the oars for ourselves, or are we going to listen to the captain that says, I must stay in charge? And I think people are now ready for this. I get a real sense that Scotland is on the brink of just saying, yes, I'm willing to face the future myself, for myself. We can definitely do it. We can do this, and that's what we need to resonate in the next few days.
It is interesting because you get that sense at public meetings, if, you know, on behalf of Yes, admittedly. Where do you think that has come from, though? I mean, do you think that's been building over, say, the devolution years, and you were in the Parliament for a while? Or is this just because, you know, the SNP got their majority and then were obliged, basically, because of their policy to have a referendum, and the referendum has done it? Or see, I suspect it's tapping into a wider malaise out there in society, which in England may be translating into UKIP, and I'm not comparing SNP and UKIP, but, you know, a sense of disillusion, as you say, with institutions. I
think it's all of that. I definitely think it's all of that. I think we're living in a period of turmoil in the world when, you know, you can't really sell us a scare story that's worse than what we've already experienced. Secondly, I think, like you say, institutional trust is at an all-time low and doesn't look to be recovering. But thirdly, and most importantly, and I think this is the genius of what has happened, the SNP and now the Yes campaign have focused on an almost energising positivism, which, you know, you can look all around life, and successful people tend to be optimistic people. Successful countries are brighter and more open-hearted countries. This works. Pessimism fails. Pessimism is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and optimism is too. And I get a sense that that's working its way through the country of Scotland. We have optimistic people, but we also have I guess the word for it is a dispossessed, who previously weren't registered to vote, who were bypassed by politicians, who were ignored by the system. At best, you could say that the benign system kept them just about on life support, without much hope in life. What this has done is given them an option to say there must be a better future than this. No easy street, no free lunch, no nirvana tomorrow, no jam tomorrow, but there's the chance, just the chance, to start fixing this for ourselves. Now, we're no better than any other country. Our attitude to life is redolent with just as much, I guess, discord and bigotry as most countries, but what we do have is a coherent sense of ourselves as a country. People come to live here and they become part of us. It's not an ethnic thing, it's an attitude thing. And we're only 5 million people, and there's something about being small that allows us to create a sense of common purpose. And that's what we're reaching for, I think. We're not going to become Norway or Sweden in 1 year, 5 years, or even 10 years.
I can't speak Norwegian.
I'm talking, of course, about the sort of social cohesion, but we can reach for it. And over time, over a period of time, we can gradually improve not just the economic performance, which we must, but also the social cohesion. What we're doing just now is we're being managed in decline as London booms and the rest of the UK relatively falls behind. And politics is about throwing money at the symptoms, about stitching wounds, about putting sticking plasters on, rather than about improving people's life chances. And I think that's what's failing in the model of Britain. I completely respect what Britain has done over 300 years, not all of it, but much of it. I respect British identity, I feel it myself. But the idea of a governing model made in London and focused on London and sending money to the provinces, I think is done.
Why don't Labour indicate that they've got this kind of message too? I mean, if you were looking for, social change, I mean, that's why even people that we know of as, perhaps not the most admirable Labour MPs, presumably went into politics to change the world. That was always the model when young people got politicised. I mean, Labour is a constant theme in the debate from people who are just deeply dismayed, disappointed, wondering, and not convinced, I think, either by their current leadership. I mean, what's gone wrong with Labour in our society?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, I would always say that I grew up in an area where I should be a Labour Party supporter. I've got tons of family and friends at all levels who are Labour people through and through, and I would never doubt the intent of the Labour Party at any level, actually all of their politicians. And I think it's really important for our campaign and the future campaigns that are to come that we don't somehow attack their intent or the Labour Party or even the individuals. They are our future converts and we have to treat them as such. It doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't disagree with them, of course we should. My analysis would be that they are facing in two different directions at once. For example, they're opposed to the universal benefits that David Cameron wants to cut in London, but they're against the universal benefits that Alex Salmond wants to keep in Edinburgh, because they just want to be opposing both ways. They don't know what they're for, they know what they're against. That would be the first point. The second point is, I think, so well schooled were they in the almost Blairite machine of winning that they forgot what they were winning for. And so brilliant people with great hearts are brought up just to win. We've got to fight. And they have a sort of tribal opposition to the SNP, which they regard as being in their turf. And I think that closes their minds to the possibilities. In their soul, they feel the same way as we do. I have no doubt about that. But it's also up to us to be more, what's the word for it, less strident in our criticism of them, to make it easier for them to come in our direction. Charles Grey has done so. Sir Charles Grey, a massive municipal leader from when I was young. I doubt he would convert if he was a Labour politician in the current era, because he would have spent the last couple of years being hit with brickbats for being Labour. I just think we should tonally watch how we go about this, because what we see on the ground is the Labour support is in our direction and coming more and more in our direction. Could
the Common Weal movement act as a kind of path, a route by which Labour people could find themselves in more in a kind of national side of the debate?
Possibly. I mean, I think there's lots of different ways to do this. I mean, there's lots of good people all across the spectrum. There's ex-Labour politicians, ex-Labour activists who are all moving, and they can all play their part by talking about the journey they've gone on, where they I guess, fell out of love with not the Labour Party or the Labour ideals, but what it had become. And they can reach for
the difference, really,
a rebirth. Exactly, and there's a rebirth of the Labour Party, possibly, to come in an independent Scotland, and you can see how that could be a positive, just as much as there could be a rebirth of a centre-right party. I can't imagine it'll be the Conservatives, because that brand is done now. And that leaves the open question, what happens to the SNP? And my view is that we, the SNP, have to become the unifying national party, less nationalist, more national, that tries to stitch a progressive majority together in the country. That's the future I see for the SNP. But let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Just lastly, you're in business. If there is a yes vote, what's the implication? I mean, at the moment, it's a kind of, we're getting the doom and gloom. I mean, I always think if there's a yes vote, there could be, I mean, look at other countries. You get an explosion of global interest, of people relocating here, quite apart from the kind of diplomatic people coming. Educational exchange, the whole thing could take off, could it not?
Well, that's always been my belief. There's a sort of short-term and there's a long-term answer to that question, Derek. I mean, the short-term answer is what you've described. There will be a bit of change to be managed. We've heard the discussions about the banks, that organisations will need to reorder themselves, and with that will come some costs, but also some remarkable revenue opportunities. I think Edinburgh and the central belt of Scotland, and hopefully the other regions too, will be full of people coming to figure out what's happening in Scotland, not just in public sector, but international, but also in business organisations. In political terms, we talked a lot about the costs of setup. We currently pay money to London to have our civil service administered from offices that cost 10 times as much. As my office in London would be 10 times as expensive as my office in Edinburgh, and in a labour market which is one of the most expensive in the world. But the long-term answer to your question really rests on the conundrum, will we be better for our own economy or will we be worse? And this gets to the very heart of the question we're going to answer next Thursday. Do we believe that having policies set by people who are focused on Scotland, if you're lucky, maybe 1 in 10 times, and with a government you vote for maybe 1 in every 2 times, is that going to be better for economic policy that helps us compete? Or is having a government in Edinburgh elected by people in Scotland focused on the Scottish interest every day more likely to get it right? Now, a cynic could say that all politicians get it wrong to varying degrees. My fundamental belief is Scotland changes with independence. We become more focused on getting the economy motoring so we can create the society we want. I think responsibility increases. I think the economic imperative grows. I'm massively excited about it. All of the fundamentals are great for Scotland. We vote. There's been, 142 countries since the war becoming independent, roughly 2 a year. We vote with more money, more resource, more information, and more of a platform of existing government institutions than any of them. You know, there's no country taken this choice with more going for it than Scotland has. So people need fear nothing. What they need fear, I guess, if they have to fear one thing, is are we up to it as individuals? Do we want to lie down and sleepwalk through life, or are we willing to get out of bed and give it a go? And we know in life that if you let life happen to you, you don't succeed, you don't reach your potential. If you just set a goal for yourself and go for it, all things are possible.